last time I have said that the opening up of our world into new vistas beyond what we know as consumers and extractors of the planet, that can be set in motion through a more intuitive and poetic vision of the earth, the cosmos, and life itself, including, our own place in the vast scheme of things. So this more intuitive or poetic and poetic vision, which is something we can train ourselves to apply, as a skillful means to escape the imprisonment of modernity. And by going via our own nervous system to perceive where we actually are, to check it out, for ourselves through sensing and feeling, rather than, being just stuck on the words, what we've heard in school or what we've heard on the media. To directly experience how deeply and intrinsically we are inseparable from the biosphere, the web of life. And that's not something, we can learn through reading about it. That can be a signpost, but then we have to go there by sensing into it, to have a direct experience of it, to drop down from the head into the body. And, and it's not gonna tell us what we are, but much more how we are. And that can really only be experienced directly through sensing into and with our energy bodies. The aliveness and the vibrancy I'm often, speaking about, we can feel inside, and a few inches beyond the skin of these human earth bodies. And, by letting go of these habitual patterns of thinking, we can cultivate an increasing familiarity with this base frequency of our energy bodies. And this familiarity with our own energy bodies can function as a receiver for information that comes from being in relationship with others, with the more than human world, and in particular, with the vast body of the planet. So once, we have a sense of the baseline of the energy body, whenever there is any information arising into it, there's much more capacity to have the sensitivity to discern that in an intuitive way. And the less other avenues of communication are open to us, the less we can, communicate with the planet through talking or writing. That's not possible. So then that sensing becomes stronger and stronger, because it's really the only way how we can go into communication. We can also, go by seeing and listening, to the different beings, in particular of the more than human world, but to really communicate with the entirety of the planet being, I think it's that sensing, which is the avenue of communication which we can cultivate to make it more stronger and more resilient and more capable to receive information, as the word so beautifully says, into the formation of our bodies. We receive this communication. And this requires a slowing down and a dropping down of awareness from the sinking mind down into the body. A quiet, unrelenting dedication to listening with the body, with the intention, to be guided by this self-regenerative healing intelligence of the planet, in a way on how best to participate in the healing and evolution of the planet. And that, it definitely can't come from the head, but has to come from the bottom up, from the ground up. And recently, the sequel to Hospicing Modernity has been published by Vanessa Mercado de Oliveira, and it's called Outgrowing Modernity. And I have a beautiful quote from that book, which speaks exactly to that, to the way how the planet being communicates. And she says like this: in our attempt to heal, we are often tempted to try to control the process, a conditioning deeply embedded in us by modernity. This journey, however, requires release and surrender, letting the song and dance from the ground up guide you, immersing yourself in the sensations that arise. Healing happens not on your terms, but in the movement that unfolds. So the song and dance from the ground to guide us. And we can receive, the song and dance with the energy body. The vibrancy and the aliveness we can connect with, that's the song and dance, which comes from the ground up. And it's a wordless communication, which we perceive, as different frequencies, I think. And the more we have, trained ourselves to be with that subtle experience, the more we have the capacity also to notice shifts in frequency. And then they kind of communicate not with the intellect, but communicate with the heart, with the chitta. And there's an intuitive understanding, an intuitive knowing, a holistic knowing which becomes available. More like an atmospheric knowing. I'm not quite sure, how to call it, but it's, and then later on, we might even be able to put words to it, but that's more like an art, rather than a science. How often poems and music, can put something into expression which doesn't really have words, but it's more between the lines. It's an aesthetic, a poetic landing in us, which can be very uplifting, and can create a lot of spaciousness and a sense of deep connectedness and purpose, which is like permeates our being in a way, nothing else can. So I'm gonna read that quote of Vanessa one more time. In our attempt to heal, we are often tempted to try to control the process, a conditioning deeply embedded in us by modernity. This journey, however, requires release and surrender, letting the song and dance from the ground guide you, immersing yourself in the sensations that arise. Healing happens not on your terms, but in the movement that unfolds. So the sensations, which arise, which can be sensed in the energy body or with the energy body. And language, for example, or music, poetry, any kind of form of art, true creativity comes through in that way, I think. And I've mentioned in another session about the Inuit concept of Quetzalcoatl, which I've learned from Francis Weller, and he was saying, what that means. That's a concept which is a part of Inuit culture, and it's very complex, but they have a word for it, which is amazing, and meaning, sitting together in the darkness expectantly, waiting for something creative to burst forth. That's what Quetzalcoatl means. And that's something which is done with intention. If people don't know what to do, that's what they do. They are okay with not knowing and then sitting together in the darkness, waiting expectantly for something to burst forth, to come through from the depths of the planet being. I think that's really amazing. Because when the complexity is such that the human mind can't wrap itself around it, there is this trusting and this surrendering to this much vaster intelligence. We are just like a little part of a cell in this much vaster being. And and to recondition ourselves to have faith and have the courage to try that out. That's what we are now just stumbling into to learn, as we are coming out of the confinements of modernity into this wide vista of being participants of the planet. It's a completely different way of understanding ourselves and of understanding who we are. And it's not about, we can't really say what we are, but we can say how we are. So all of these very subtle shifts, these micro adjustments, they are adding up over time. And I think that's what we are trying to do here on those Wednesdays, to do it together, because it's difficult to do it alone. It's easy to fall into doubt. Maybe that's all just like some weird woo-woo stuff. And then, doing it together and doing it frequently, relentlessly, because it's micro adjustments which are adding up, like any kind of a good practice, any kind of a skill, it's like that, learning the piano, learning learning carpentry, learning anything really of good quality. It takes a lot of time and a lot of small learnings and humility, For example, I trained as a nun in England in a very traditional place, and I think I was there almost 10 years, before we started to teach. Just a little bit, here and there assisting. And in the first few years as, as anagarikas, as novices, we never said a word anywhere. So it was, it required a lot of being willing to serve something bigger and to surrender to the process. Even sometimes, what we had to kind of swallow or something was sometimes really hard, But I think now, so many years later, I really understand the benefit of it, If you really want to do this, then you have to first, show it. Building the trust and moving at the speed of trust, which needs some time to build. So maybe let's go now to a guided meditation. Just, starting with allowing your breath to take you into the body. And today, we have about 40 minutes for the meditation. And the willingness to slow down and being okay that this is a process, which is not in our control. And it's a series of micro adjustments. And we don't have to work hard, but there has to be a consistency. So now allowing the gravitational embrace of the planet, of the earth to be felt, as she gently pulls us towards her center. And maybe shortly remembering why you're doing this practice. The intention and motivation, which brings you here to this pocket of sanity. And feeling your blood pulsing in your neck and your fingertips. And really enjoying the pulsing and the automatic cycling, knowing that this liquids which are pumped through the body, they're actually part of the larger water and mineral cycles of your watershed. So this doesn't only go through the ground here, your watershed, but also through your body by drinking the water which comes out of the tap and then going to the bathroom. It's just very mind-boggling actually to think that way. How much we are actually total part of this and how easily that can escape us. And that's exactly what we are cultivating here, a more available recognition of that truth, for example. this non-separability from the biosphere as a direct sensorial experience, which in an ideal situation you would condition our way of thinking and doing. And for that, it needs to be seen and integrated many, many times. These micro adjustments which are happening in the neural pathways in the body, in the nervous system. It's a adjustment, really, like an uploading different information and then integrating it in the hard drive. The hard drive, being the body, the biocomputer, which has been developed over 4.6 billion years, as long as the planet is doing its planeting. So allowing that to come online by accessing information which was excluded because of the way of looking, the conditioning of modernity. And it has worked quite well for some time, but now it is very clear it's not sustainable. And the earth is talking to us without words about that need, which we can perceive as the urge to evolve, a certain kind of calling or a pressure towards opening into a new paradigm. And the communication is from the ground up. And it's awesome that we can, really participate. And that it has been, it kept us for quite a long time because we were so inside of modernity, believing it all. And now suddenly, bang, it starts to crack. And this new information is coming through. And here we are, we already have a certain amount of capacity because of the Buddhist meditation practice. We can direct our minds and we can, create openings for receiving spaciousness. And we can live, according to the refugees, which are, the way how we can support the mind to open. By not being afraid of when the mind closes down, but meeting it with a lot of kindness and knowing, that we can't just forget about the past. But the past is the soil for the future. And it needs to be met with that knowing. So how the energy in the energy body how as we are sitting here and we're getting more settled, the frequency rises, it becomes more refined. And the source of the energy is actually the sun, which is in a relationship with the earth. And the energy we can sense in our bodies, which is, with each heartbeat, energy is distributed throughout the body. And the energy comes through food, which has grown on the planet due to the sun and all other things we contribute, water, minerals, and so on. But the energy, in the body is produced by the food and also the sunlight as it meets our skin. So, if we're meeting our bodies in this very different way, it just opens up a lot of space. And then, of course, we still need to go to the supermarket and have a driver's license and a bank account and so on. But it's all held within a much vaster context. And there's like balancing between those two ways, the conventional and the ultimate. And that is, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path is all about that. Avoiding extremes, neither getting completely lost in having a bank account and all of that stuff, or getting completely lost in, being part of a living, intelligent earth. The one would be, complete indulgence, and the other one would be like getting lost in bypassing. So the middle way is being able to hold both at the same time. That's the art about this. And then, skillfully, intentionally using imagination to support the sensing. This poetic vision of the world. How it's also used in the Vajrayana, in particular in Tibetan Buddhism, with different sadhanas where different deities are visualized, like the Taras or Guru Rinpoche or others. And then we visualize ourselves in that Buddha field with them and maybe receive empowerments in that way, on an energy body level. It's all done with visualization, with imagination, to a different way of looking. And we can do the same here, but instead of having a Tara or a Guru Rinpoche, we have Gaia. And the empowerment comes through eating, drinking, and breathing. And on one level, that's just a normal thing to do in order to survive. But on a more ultimate level, it's a receiving of information, of empowerment. So that's a more poetic way of looking at eating, drinking, and so on. And it uplifts the chitta, the heart. And the Jungian psychologist, American James Hillman, said, to sense deeply, we must imagine. And to imagine accurately, we must sense. So the imagination can help us to open up space inside. And then there's more vistas to sense into. So that, that vista of imagining ourselves to be inside the body of the earth, which we actually are, but it's not so easily visible, but imagination can help to make it more available, the perception. And then with that as support, sensing into how that feels, the sensations within the framework of the imagination make more sense. Something which makes truly sense on a cognitive and sensing level at the same time. And there's some kind of aha happening, inside the body. A kind of rewiring happens when this all, meets in the right way. And I think, that's what Vanessa means when she speaks about the song and dance from the ground up, which is changing us. Because the intellect cannot handle the complexity. It must be a different way of meeting it. In a way which has long been ostracized basically from the scientific worldview as being something lesser or something primitive. And now, bang, we are waking up and out of this, realizing the amazing complexity of these biocomputers we call human bodies. But because, we are just at the edge of emerging out of modernity, it brings up a lot of fear also. It has psychological repercussions, which, we need to take time to slowly ease into that. Because modernity was all about control, and now we're becoming aware of the vulnerability. Being within the earth. The vulnerability and lack of control of that fact. And, relinquishing those defenses slowly, as a training. There's my first teacher, Ajahn Buddhadasa, said, we're only going to relinquish those if we become perceptive of something better than usual, he would say. We are okay to relinquish those defenses if we get a sense of what that could open up, this shared communication system with Gaia. Through listening and, communion and expansion of perception. And this is where this imagination needs to come in, to support that, the growing out of the old box. This imagination which can help with cultivating a sense of devotion, reverence, awe, wonder, however we want to call it, which naturally opens up the mind and the heart. Because at its deepest level, the psyche remains sympathetically bound to the earth that mothered it into existence. And we can notice that, with children, they have this natural awe at the natural world. And then we kind of forget it. It gets educated out of us. But it cannot be lost, but it can be forgotten. And through remembering, it can come back. This is like an empowerment, really. This increasing, coming back of identifying as Earth, as planet. It's the medicine. I think I've once, shared this food reflection by Venerable Mahako Sananda, who was a very well-known Cambodian monk who passed away maybe, 10, 20 years ago. I've met him maybe 2 times or so. And he says, I am the world and I eat the world. Thinking thus, I understand all the teachings of the Buddha. I am the world and I eat the world. Thinking thus, I understand all the teachings of the Buddha. You can take a few minutes to just silently listen into and with the body. I want to share, as we are slowly coming to the end, we have another 5 minutes or so, sharing a poem by Joy Harjo. It's called Remember. Remember the sky that you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon. Know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. You are evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father, he is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth, we are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. Remember the wind. Remember her voice. She knows the origin of this universe. Remember you are all people and all people are you. Remember you are this universe and this universe is you. Remember all is motion, is growing, is you. Remember language comes from this. Remember the dance that language is, that life is. Remember. Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems. And to look at the tree as a poem, spoken by the earth.